Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Hey gang, this happened a few years ago in the Netherlands. At the time of writing, my GF was coming over, and we felt like having a few drinks in a local cafe that evening. The peculiar thing about our favorite cafe, though, was that they didn't provide any electronic payment options. It was all cash and cash only. However, as luck would have it, there was an ATM very close to the main bus stop, which was also close to a local supermarket. So after my GF's bus arrived, I told her I'd grab some cash from our shared bank account in order to pay for our drinks that evening. So far, so good. When we got to the ATM, there was an abandoned cart in front of it, which looked kind of odd to us, also considering that the pavement had a bit of a slope. Anyway, my GF figured she'd return the cart while I got the cash. Things went pretty normal until I suddenly feel my GF push into me. When I look up, she's looking backwards. "Excuse you," she sneers. "Unlike you, I actually know this guy and I'm allowed to stand this close to him." She also pats my shoulder and tells me that she got this. So I focus on completing my transaction. I had a good hunch what might be going on there, but I also wasn't worried too much because I always keep my hand covered with my wallet or my papers whenever I start typing. The guy behind me makes a bit of a lame excuse about trying to figure out if this was the right ATM, which is pretty BS because it doesn't matter from what bank they are. When all of a sudden, some lady walks up to us while screaming, "I saw all that. Why did you try to cut the line?" My GF tells her that she's not cutting the line, that I'm her boyfriend and she's merely trying to get Mr. Snoop over there off my back. The woman doesn't want to listen and once again tells my GF that she'd better scram because trying to cut in line is so darn rude. At this time, I had put the money in my wallet, grabbed the receipt, and after I turn around, I tell the lady that my GF wasn't cutting in line, and that we'll be leaving now, to which my GF adds that she might want to watch her back if she's going to use the ATM. There's a line which people should wait behind, and it's there for a reason, my GF says to her, but the woman doesn't want to hear any of it. She scoffs, makes a snide comment about a whole line cutters and how people like her, my GF, always try to blame others, crap which we didn't respond to. No use wasting time over that nonsense. While we're walking to the end of the street, my Jeff wonders what the heck that was all about, after which I shrug. Karens be Karens, I guess. We get to the corner, look around, and lo and behold, the creepy guy is allowing Karen to go in front of her. What a surprise. And she happily accepted the gesture as well. But something was not right there. Fast forward to a few weeks later, approx. 2 months or so, and I'm reading a local newspaper when I suddenly spot an article in the regional section which warns about PIN fraud, explaining that people need to be careful when using ATMs because scammers were known to try and look over people's shoulders in order to discover any PIN codes. And what do you know? It featured a photo of the same lady who'd been berating my GF. Apparently, she had also fell victim to these scammers, and the article described how she had no idea how any of that could have happened. It was a complete surprise to her. Yeah, sure. If only someone could have warned her about all that. Oh wait, we did, and yet she wanted none of it. Maybe next time hear people out before you start berating them? Don't get me wrong. I don't like it that she got scammed out of her money. But considering the way she behaved, unwilling to listen to any reason, I can't say that I'm all that surprised either. Hi. First time posting here, but boy do I have some stories. Also, sorry for the long post. I tend to give too many details. I work as an instructor teaching parkour and free-running basics to small kids, ages 2 to 6, and most of my classes are in private institutions like schools or specialized gym. Now I say basics, but it really is more bodily control and perception than bona fide parkour since they're really young. I separate kids based on age and skill into different classes which challenge them accordingly, having the older kids dip their toes into actual parkour and free-running skills. Now onto the story. I had this mother, henceforth EM, of 2 kids, EK1 and EK2, ages 2 and 3 respectively, come for a test class to see if the kids are interested. The kids enjoy the class since I try to make them both challenging and fun by playing games where they have to traverse obstacle courses. And I try to set up scenarios for them to use their imagination, such as the pirate ship is sinking. We have to jump onto the lifeboats, etc. The administration later lets me know they enrolled and all is well. Now, something you have to know about my classes is that even though they are taught in a special order, made room, and I make sure most surfaces are padded and am super paranoid about accidents. So I do my best to keep a safe environment. Sometimes kids can take a fall, especially if they aren't following instructions or throw tantrums. This was the case with EK12 since they were always refusing to listen to instructions and threw tantrums when I tried to explain why they couldn't just run off to play in the room, as if it was just a playground, which it absolutely isn't. After a couple of weeks of this, Em comes into my classroom to tell me, not ask mind you, that her kids are ready for the advanced class, which is kids aged 5, 6, because they have grown bored of the kiddie class since they are so much better than the other kids. They are not. I politely let her know that although they are indeed pretty active kids, they first have to become responsible of their actions since they tend to push kids around and not listen to instructions. And therefore, they are not yet ready since the older kids' class is way tougher, and I can't just follow 2 kids around to take care of them and neglect the rest of the class since there could be an accident. Now, these are not in any way big groups. I only take groups of 5 kids at most since it's all I can handle on my own to make sure every kid is as safe as possible. But having to take care of underage kids and leaving other 3 kids unattended is a big no-no in my book. Anyway, Em doesn't seem to take my words kindly but accepts my decision, or so I thought. Next week, I come in to have the receptionist tell me Em had basically thrown a tantrum to have her kids go into the advanced class anyway, despite my warnings, and asks me if I can just let it slide this time. Obviously, I'm not okay with this as it endangers not only X, but other kids as well, but I can see her storming into my classroom again. Angrier this time if I say no, so I ask the front desk to have her sign an additional waiver to the one she already had to sign when enrolling the kids. The day comes when I have to teach the advanced class and then come marching with smug grin none other than M and X. I welcome them and start my class, which as I said is way more demanding and has some actual parkour techniques sprinkled in. It would be unfair to the age-appropriate kids to downplay the class just because these entitled kids enrolled, so I don't. However, I keep a close eye on them to avoid any issues. That day, the kids had to clear a small gap jump and latch onto an edge wall and shimmy along while hanging, picture-hanging movement in the Assassin's Creed series. Everything but the floor is padded, of course. However, it is a substantial fall for kids that age, about 1.5 meters. As I'm helping one of the older kids shimmy along, I see the next in line to make the jump is the elder of the entitled siblings, and I ask her to wait for me so that I can spot her jump in case her hands slip or she doesn't clear the gap. She starts throwing a tantrum about how she's a big girl now, and she can do it on her own, to which I respond to just let me be there to make sure she doesn't get hurt. I run back to her after helping the other kid reach the ground and help her reach the wall since she couldn't clear the gap, to which she goes absolutely mad and storms out of the classroom. 5 minutes later, she comes back in with him demanding that I let her jump on her own. I once again explain why that is a bad idea, and we run the circuit once again. Again, I'm helping the kid lapping before her and ask her to wait for me, but instead of listening, she jumps into the wall, fails to clear the gap, crashes into the wall face first, and then plops into the ground, knocking the wind out of her. I rush to check if she's unhurt, which thankfully she is aside from the fall, and she starts swiping at me, and once she recovers, starts bawling her eyes out and storms out of the classroom again. Once again, I'm faced with the EM demanding to know why I let her daughter get hurt during my class, and starts accusing me of being negligent and incompetent, and that she'll take measures against the school and me. I tell her I understand she's upset, but I ask the kid to stay still and wait for me, but she refused to listen. And to remember that I warned her they were not yet ready for this class as it did not follow instructions, which were meant to keep them safe. Em keeps going about how I can expect to be fired soon, and the usual entitled parent monologue, and then leave. I tell the front desk what just happened and ask them to check the cameras in my classroom so that they can have proof in case she really tries something legally, and reminded them she had signed a second waiver. Thankfully, she never did, and she never came back even though he paid the whole month in advance. I have some more stories of this kind since extracurricular activities tend to have these kind of incidents and draw in entitled people. So let me know if you want to hear more, and I'll try to post some of mine and coworker stories in here. Forgive me if this isn't formatted well. I followed this thread for a long time, but only just created this account to post this story. Names have been changed. For context, I am a pastor in a large denomination that takes years to become fully recognized or ordained as a clergy person. There are several interviews with different teams to see if a person is fit to serve. When this story occurred, I was already past 4 steps and working on the last and final step to be ordained. Part of this step required recording and submitting a sermon on one of only a set number of biblical texts. Sermons using outside texts would not be accepted. At the time, I was an associate pastor in a relatively large church, almost 1,000 on a Sunday between multiple services, and I was initially hired to be one of the primary preachers. However, the senior pastor would set the sermon series, sermon topics, and scriptures for each Sunday. We were asked to stay on theme and on topic for any service in which we preached. Soon after I arrived at this church, the senior pastor, who'd been there for many years, announced their retirement. An interim would take their place until the next long-term pastor was selected. We'll call this interim Pastor Richard. The first time I met with Pastor Richard after the former pastor's retirement and his start, he told me that he didn't think I had what it took to be a pastor. He then proceeded to strip me of nearly all my pastoral responsibilities. Prior to his arrival, I regularly preached 3 or 4 Sundays a month, was called for visits, and oversaw the sacraments. After the meeting with Pastor Richard, I was relegated to organizing a team of 125 volunteers, ensuring we had liturgists, ushers, greeters, and parking lot attendants. My preaching was also cut to just once a month at best. And even though I was working on my paperwork for the final step toward ordination, Pastor Richard refused to schedule any of the biblical texts required for the sermon for my ordination paperwork. To his credit, he did say that I could use whatever verses from the Bible that I wanted, so long as I stayed on theme for the sermon and series. However, I refused to bend Scripture to say something that it doesn't. If a text is about forgiveness, I won't try and text it to make it fit a theme of justice. Somehow, every time I was scheduled to preach, the theme of the sermon did not fit any of the handful of texts I was allowed to preach for my paperwork. For anyone curious, it was also a requirement that the sermon be delivered in the church you were serving at the time, meaning I couldn't fill in for someone else in order to complete the task. Eventually, Pastor Richard's interim tenure was drawing to a close. There was one Sunday between his departure and the next senior pastor's arrival. That Sunday was not part of a sermon series and did not have a selected theme. It was preacher's choice. This would have been perfect, because I could get at least one sermon recorded for my paperwork to submit, just so you'd want to record all of the texts so that you could choose the best one of the group. However, I was not scheduled as one of the preachers for any of the services. The 2 scheduled preachers for Sunday were Greg and Sarah. Greg was not a pastor and was not on track to become a pastor. So I went to Pastor Richard and asked if I could take Greg's place so that I could record at least one sermon for submission for ordination. Richard told me that I could not switch with Greg and he would not allow me to take his place. I agreed that I would not take Greg's place and left his office. But shortly after I left Richard's office, I went over and met with Sarah. I knew she wanted that particular weekend off. So I offered to switch preaching assignments. I would take the weekend I wanted, and she would switch for a weekend a month down the line. Sarah immediately agreed, and I went to the person who sent out our weekly email and had the information switched. I did not ask permission, and I did not tell Richard what I had done. The email went out on Wednesday night, and on Thursday morning, when Richard came in, the first thing he did was come into my office. He demanded to know why I disobeyed his order. I simply pointed out that he told me I couldn't preach in Greg's place, which I wasn't. Instead, I would preach in Sarah's place. There wasn't much he could do because the information had already been sent out to the church, so he left my office in a rage. I preached on Sunday, using one of the required texts, and used it to submit for the final step in my ordination. Unfortunately, I was not ordained that year. It would take me another year beyond that. But the look on his face when he realized I had followed his order to the letter, and there was nothing he could do about it, still makes me chuckle years later. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. So check this out, guys. Back in the day, I was working the front desk as a receptionist at this massive hotel chain that kicks off with an picture this. A sprawling hotel with fancy chandeliers, plush carpets, and more gold accents than you'd find in a hip-hop music video. I'm talking swanky vibes all around. Now, I gotta admit, I'm not your typical corporate drone. I'm all about that laid-back life, taking smoke breaks whenever the stress starts creeping in. And that's exactly where our little story begins, in the parking lot puffing on a cigarette like it's my personal Zen therapy. So there I am, minding my own business and getting my nicotine fix, when all of a sudden this shiny Dodge Viper rolls up like it owns the joint. And let me tell you, the driver matched the car's fanciness. Think high heels that could double as weapons and enough jewelry to blind a mole rat? Miss High and Mighty steps out of the car, and before I even have a chance to exhale a cloud of smoke, she's all up in my face. She demands that I park her precious wheels like it's the most natural thing in the world. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all about customer service, but this is the parking lot, not a valet stand. I as calmly as someone can while nursing a cigarette, explained to her that parking rides is not exactly in my job description. That's when I dropped the bomb. You're looking for our awesome valet service, ma'am. They're the real car whisperers around here. Now, for those of you who might be new to the concept, valet service is like a magical car concierge. These folks swoop in, park your ride like they're in a James Bond movie, and they hand you a ticket like you're entering a swank club. It's luxury for your wheels, basically. But Miss Fancy Pants is having none of it. She's adamant that I park her car. She starts going off like a firecracker, words flying left and right. And folks, let me tell you, if there's one thing I'm not good at, it's dealing with entitled Karens. So I keep my chill, take another drag of my cigarette, and drop the truth bomb again. Ma'am, I'm on my break, and I'm not exactly the valet superstar you're looking for. But hang tight, I'll get someone who can help you out. Well, that's when the dam bursts. She steps out of her car, looking like she's about to unleash a primal scream that would put any banshee to shame. She's got her arms flailing, hair flying, and she's just belting out how she's some Veep with a capital V and how she's got important stuff to do. Now, here's where I have to give myself a pat on the back. I didn't lose my cool. Nope, I held on to my I don't get paid enough for this mindset, and I dialed up one of the valet champs to save the day. But as you might expect, Karen's not done. Oh no, she goes from verbal fireworks to a full-on physical assault. She's throwing punches like a boxer in training and slapping like she's auditioning for a bad reality TV show. And all I can think is, how in the heck did this lady become rich with those moves? Enough was enough. With the grace of a sloth on tranquilizers, I dodged a punch and mustered all the strength I could summon, which, let's be real, isn't much, and threw a punch right back. A punch that said, "Hey lady, I'm a receptionist, not a punching bag." Karen takes a step back, rubbing her cheek like I just slapped some reality into her. She's fuming, her eyes practically shooting lasers at me. And in that moment, I half expected her to transform into a dragon and breathe fire. But here's the kicker, folks. Instead of going all-out Terminator style on me, Karen stumbles back, clearly realizing that I'm not the pushover she thought I was. She shoots me one last death glare, mutters something about getting me fired, and scurries back to her shiny chariot. Her Dodge Viper. Now, I ain't proud of throwing a punch, but I'll admit, it felt kind of satisfying to see her retreat like a deflated balloon. As she climbs into her car, she starts revving the engine like she's auditioning for a Fast and Furious spin-off. And just when I thought the drama was over, she rolls down her window, leans out like some kind of twisted movie villain, and hisses, "I'll be back, you just wait." Oh boy, if I had a dime for every time someone said that. But hey, at least she didn't morph into a metallic killing machine with a deadpan "I'll be back" like Schwarzenegger. She zooms out of the parking lot like she's in a race against time, leaving a trail of tire screeches and wounded egos. I chuckle to myself, shaking my head as I sub out my cigarette. Just another day in the glamorous life of a hotel receptionist, right? But you know what? As crazy as it was, it's stories like these that make the job more interesting than your average 9-to-5 grind. Well, I'm back. And hopefully for the final time. My sister came up with the most convoluted plan to get her way. And guess what? It worked. But there's more. Here's what happened. Some time ago, my sister gave birth to a baby boy. She made sure we knew the gender well in advance, as well as sending our parents pictures of ultrasounds and anything else that kept our parents' need for a grandchild motor running. My sister only allowed our parents to come to the hospital to meet their grandchild at the birth. They had to take a last-minute flight to Leh just to be there. My sister also forbade me from going. She said I'd ruined her life enough. She wished she was an only child, with me dead, all stuff like that in repetition. And she doesn't want me anywhere near her ever again. Well, the feeling is mutual. Though 3 months before the birth, my sister showed back up again. This time she pleaded with our parents to let her in to talk and not to contact me that time, because she really didn't want me there. She only had 1 day before she had to head back to law and had driven through the night. I wasn't there to see it. But from the details I got from my parents, my sister went crying to Mom and begging her to take her back into the family. My dad said that Mom hardly wanted to look at her. Dad confronted my sister and said that she didn't bother to try and contact them in years, and that she was only back and even pregnant because it was all about the money to her. If she'd never seen my Reddit post, she would still be na vida. Mom spoke up and told her that she hoped for so long that my sister would come home to visit or even just talk to her. But it was years of no contact. She'd done everything for her. She'd favored her. She'd defended her lies. She'd made sure she didn't get a felony in court. And yet my sister showed zero appreciation. Dad backed this up too and even compared me to her, and how I at least appreciated my parents. Then he blurted out that I'd been made a legal partner in the business he is having me manage, and then I'm on track to eventually take his place one day. After that, my sister, I'm told, went hysterical and was screaming about how it wasn't fair, and it should be her instead. Somehow she was still allowed to spend the night in her old room. And the next morning she dropped this bomb on my parents. I heard her emotion was just gone. I guess she didn't feel the need to keep up the act anymore. She said that she'd allow Mom and Dad to adopt her child in exchange for a house in Cali and an undisclosed sum of money that I'm not privy to. And you know what? My parents agreed. But my dad had demands of his own. In return for the adoption of my nephew, my sister was give up any and all rights to her son, sign a contract stating that she will have no part of the family ever again, and change her legal name. That last part really surprised me. Dad went so far as to pay for her name to be changed in order to separate her from the family. This meant getting all of her information reissued, such as her diploma, college degree, passport, and anything else that ever had her name on it. All paid for by my parents. And as part of the agreement, my sister could never change her name back or even to something similar. My parents didn't half-ass anything in this endeavor. My participation in it, though, was minimal at best. My parents went to California to purchase a house my sister approved of, but she would not be given the house until after the baby was born and in their hands. She was very unhappy about this, as she wanted to move into the house after she'd signed the contract. But our parents had none of it. They gave my sister a week to sign, and she signed in front of a lawyer in less than 48 hours. So as of then, I'm now considered an only child. I'm not going to say I'm happy about that. I used to love my sister before she became a narcissist. But what's done is done. And I'm over it. My parents also tracked down the baby's biological father to get him to relinquish his parental rights as well. My sister found out he went back to his hometown in Arizona after he abandoned her, and my parents went to see him before the baby was born. He had no problem signing away paternal his rights after a DNA test confirmed he was the father. He must have still been in cahoots with my sister because he also wanted a house and a payout as compensation to sign away his rights. Though not nearly as much, I'm told. My parents purchased him a cheap house somewhere and paid him off. Well, I say cheap in comparison to the house they bought for my sister-in-law. This was one expensive baby to adopt. But as my dad said, it's worth every cent to make sure my grandson has a future. My dad sold one of his smaller businesses to a competitor in order to get the money together without really affecting his other finances. Said competitor had been making him offers for years, and my dad wasn't that involved with the business anymore. So he finally took the offer, but only if they retained all of the employees already there, which they did. And now it's their name on the sign. But my parents didn't care because they fully adopted my nephew. When the child was born, my sister didn't even want to hold him. And I heard even once referred to the baby as that thing, which was beyond cruel. She even admitted she was planning to sell the baby in a closed adoption to someone else, had our parents not agreed to do it themselves. She got her house and got her money, and then promptly cut contact all over again. So she's gone from our lives for good and no longer related to us. My mom was doing the bulk of the parenting of my nephew till they can find a live-in nanny to help pick up the slack since they're getting old. They needed help with a newborn, especially when they become a toddler. My mom is very happy, but my dad has made it clear to her that they will not make the same mistakes they did with my sister. No favoritism, no enabling bad behavior, no lying. And that the child will not ever know his real mother as she's dead to us. And if my sister ever tries to seek him out, she'd be in serious breach of contract and have to return the house or its monetary value. So I doubt she'd bother to ever try. After the time she'd first shown up pregnant, my sister and I have only spoke once more over the phone. And it was after my nephew was born. For the record, she called me to gloat and tell me off one last time. I told her she was a delusional narcissist who only wanted to blame me because it's easier for her than accepting reality. But she just reacted smugly that it didn't matter what I said. She's gonna believe what she wants to believe, and she'd already won anyway, since she got what she wanted. She's still got a good career in law, lots of money, and now a house. And all it cost her was a baby she didn't even really want. She can live however she wants now, and we can't do a damn thing about it because we were no longer family. I hung up and blocked her number. I was seething with anger, but there was no point in arguing further. In her own way, yeah, she'd won. But at what cost? She no longer has family and no one to rely on ever again if things go south for her. My nephew isn't going to be raised as another son due to a 30-year age difference between me and him. So my parents want to make it clear that he is a grandson as he grows up, and that we are his true family. Our goal is to make sure he never has any desire to seek out his biological mother. She never wanted him anyway. And it's better he understands that from a young age, rather than pine for the mother he never had. So I guess this is the end. It was a long time coming. But I'm honestly happy my sister no longer has any connection to us. My 23 male was repeatedly stuck playing the part of helper and babysitter on family outing. I had to move out of my parents' house because I kept being forced to help watch my 3 nephews. Last year, we took a family vacation in summer to the coast. I rode along with my parents and paid for my hotel room. Only I had to share that room with 3 rowdy boys because my sister and her husband wanted a room to themselves. I was promised time to do my own things on the vacation. But instead, I ended up having to help with these kids. I complained to everyone about it and was reminded I was there for free. And then we pretty much just did only one thing I wanted to do, which was tour an art gallery. I like doing this whenever I'm at the coast, but the kids find it boring. This year, my parents have a beach trip planned for June, and they assumed I'd be riding along the same way as last year. But I refused. I said I'd be driving myself and paying for my own hotel, stay to have my own room. My parents were shocked and tried to remind me of the cost. I said it was no worry. I've got a good job and a decent running car. I can more than afford it. That's when the but started. I stated the previously listed things as why I'll be driving myself and paying for myself. I want to be able to enjoy this vacation as an adult and not be treated like a child like last year. My parents told my sister, and she called to blow up at me that I'll be ruining the vacation if I'm off doing my own thing while she has to wrangle her 3 boys. I ended up yelling at her that last year all she did was rope me into her mess. I didn't really get to do much of anything I wanted to do. And I was treated like the bad guy for wanting to just go to an art gallery. I'm a grown man. I deserve my own vacation too. Now my sister is not speaking to me, and my parents are still trying to convince me to just ride with them to keep the peace. I'm still refusing. But the pressure is getting to me. Aida for not giving in. I know they'll have a pretty hard time when they won't have another person there to help. Update. Basically, my parents and older sister had become very comfortable with me helping with the child care of my young triplet nephew. I didn't leave home till I was 22 because I was trying to save money while also going to college. A scholarship covered a lot, and living at home kept me from getting rising debt due to my working part-time as well. I'm very thankful for this. However, after college, everyone just seemed to act like I had endless time on my hands and convince me along on a family vacation. In this so-called vacation, I was forced to babysit my 3 at the time 6-year-old nephews. I even had to share a hotel room with them. And believe me, those kids did not listen to a damn thing I said on the first night until I called their mother twice. And I was treated like the bad guy for wanting to do other things during the trip. Like if it's something the family doesn't enjoy as a whole, then it doesn't happen. Which was extremely hypocritical because I'm family and wasn't included in that vote. And you can bet I aired this grievance with my parents after my last post. And they have acknowledged being in the wrong. After that awful vacation last year, I decided it was time to move out. And did so before the summer even ended, which surprised everyone as I gave them no warning. I'd landed a great job pretty much right after college thanks to an internship, and used moving as an excuse to drop my commute from 45 minutes to 15. My sister hated this the most because it meant no more free babysitting on weekends. But she still tried to make me do it. I caved sometimes, usually by being bribed with pizza. And this sort of became a new norm. But then last month my parents announced plans for another family vacation to the same place along the coast. And they basically wanted it to go the same way. I immediately saw it for what it was. A trap. I knew that if I rode with my parents and let them buy the hotel rooms, I would be screwed over the same way as last time. So I just casually stated I'd drive myself and pay for myself. And that's when the crap storm started. When my parents realized they couldn't entrap me like before, they resorted to borderline begging. And my sister practically tried to order me to go with the flow through gaslighting. News, flash, I didn't. After I didn't cave to my sister's demands, I made the IT post after days of harassment. And then my sister somehow spotted that post in less than an hour. What followed was Pandora's bot. At first, the family was against me. My sister called our parents, and they called me when I still had a little time to talk in the morning. My parents were on the phone with me while also reading my post. I asked them if anything in the post was a lie. They sort of steered around it and called the post an exaggeration. But I pointed out numerous details that made it pretty much on the mark. Then I told them to check the comments. There were already far too many to read. I was repeatedly refreshing the page on my home C and telling them how many comments there were. Then I told them I was sick of their mentality of keeping the peace by forcing me to placate my sister. Then I said I was out of time and we would have to resume this later. Well, my parents were positively horrified that hundreds, if not thousands of people were commenting in a matter of hours. And later on I told them that the numbers had basically doubled and were still growing, which only added to their horror. So I guess they were forced to take a long look at their own actions. My sister tried to call me to witch while I was at work, but my phone was on silent till my lunch break, so all she could do was leave messages and texts. But she was persistent and managed to get through to me when I was eating my lunch. The gist of the conversation was my post had taken her parents away from her side, and now they were mad at her. In the ensuing argument between them, my parents canceled the entire vacation. Yes, they later acknowledged they just passed the blame out of embarrassment, and have fully accepted fault. They told me no excuses could excuse the fact they made me their go, to free babysitter when I wasn't even living at home anymore. They did try to backtrack a little by pointing out they never charged me rent while I was in college. But I reminded them kids don't ask to be born, and I was doing my hardest to make my own way. Then I pointed out my father had the same kind of leg up from his parents. They let him live free of charge at home while he was in college. That basically ended any argument my parents had left. When my sister managed to call me at lunch, I presented the facts to her, and she showed her true colors. She implied that I have no life, and that my free time on weekends should be spent helping her because she is tired and unable to even go out without bringing her children with her unless someone is watching them. She is a stay-at-home mother with a husband that makes a decent salary. They live in a pretty decent house that's owned, not rented. And to be frank, my nephews aren't really my responsibility. They just forced them on me and expected it to stay that way. My sister angrily hung up on me. But I'd recorded the call and then played it to my parents later. They were furious, and they basically went to war with my sister. My sister dug her heels in, blamed me, and then doubled down on her belief my life should circle around hers. I told her that was the most narcissistic and entitled thing she's ever said about me. It took days, but her husband finally stepped in and forced her to apologize to me. I'd never seen her cowed like that by anyone, but she was on the verge of crying. It ended up being admitted that one of the reasons I was the go-to babysitter was because my sister didn't trust strangers. It was never about the money. Or was it? Actually, my brother-in-law thought my sister was paying me for my time watching her kids after I moved out of my parents' house. She didn't even give me gas money. Just gave me cash that was enough to order pizza for both myself and the kids, and pocketed the rest. My sister had been short-changing me for months. He blew up at her when this came out during her half-assed apology, and she was forced to pay me what she owed me in cash entirely from her own savings, which she looked very sore about. Then my brother-in-law apologized to me for his own inaction and letting my sister walk all over me, and promised they'd get a normal babysitter from now on. Yes, it'll cause a bit of a drop in bucket for them. But my sister will be getting date nights back. Then came the family meeting the other day's evening. We all gathered up at my parents' house and everything was laid bare. Apologies all around and what not. Then my parents reinstated family vacation. And yes, I still plan to drive myself and pay for my own hotel stay. I'll even stay in a completely different hotel if my sister tries to revert me to childcare. And I have stated this, she's promised me that won't happen. And if I don't update again after the vacation, in another month or so, then you'll all know everything is fine. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.